I've spent my whole life saving others, sometimes with my rare blood, always with my heart. But in the end, all it took was one signature, and suddenly, I was invisible in my own family. They didn't throw me out with angry words or fists. No, it was colder than that. They handed me a quiet eviction, disguised as just paperwork. My son slid the documents across the table while my daughter looked away, both pretending it was for the best. Dad's accountant stood nearby, polite and silent, already fitting herself into the home I built from scratch. That day, as I packed a lifetime into a cardboard box, I caught my own reflection in the hallway mirror, a ghost in the only place I ever belonged. My family closed the door behind me, and just like that, every room filled with someone else's laughter, someone else's memories. Walking away, the world felt smaller. But as I passed the garden gate, my phone buzzed, a message from a bank I hadn't heard from in years. It was a quiet reminder of something only I knew, an old trust fund, untouched, carrying my name. If your own children replaced you without a second thought, would you let your story end there? Or would you open a new door, just to see what waited on the other side? Long before I became a stranger in my own home, I was Helen Carter, chief nurse, Midwest Hospital, wife, and mother of 2. My life revolved around caring. I spent nights at the pediatric oncology ward and weekends at family cookouts, always putting everyone else first. That's what mothers do, right? You patch wounds, remember birthdays, donate blood at dawn, and still show up with a smile for Sunday dinner. My husband, Richard, built his reputation as a self-made businessman. He owned a thriving medical supply company, traveled often, and liked to believe every success was his alone. People in our neighborhood saw us as solid. But at home, our family was a glass house, one that was starting to crack. Richard admired strength in others, but resented it in his own wife. The more independent I became, the less he saw me. He wanted a wife in the background, someone to clap from the sidelines, not a woman who could run a hospital or save lives. Our kids, Thomas and Amanda, grew up watching this silent competition. Thomas, my eldest, felt squeezed between his parents' worlds, torn by his dad's expectations, my high standards, and his own insecurities about success. The real wedge came when Richard hired Vanessa, the brilliant accountant. She was quick, discreet, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Richard said she kept the business afloat. I just noticed the way she remembered his coffee order and managed to slip into family photos without anyone really inviting her. At first, I dismissed my unease. I chalked it up to exhaustion or a mother's paranoia. But small things changed. Richard spent longer hours at work, came home distracted, and started using words like sacrifice, as if it were an excuse for his distance. Amanda, always close to her dad, began echoing his doubts about whether I was doing too much. Thomas, struggling with job cuts and student debt, pulled away, convinced he was a disappointment to both parents. Then came the day Vanessa brought me lunch at the hospital. She smiled and said, "You work too hard. Let us help for once." Her words sounded kind, but the glance she shared with Richard told a different story. The air grew thick with secrets. It wasn't long after that I received the letter from an old patient, handwritten in looping script. "Thank you for your kindness. Your blood saved me when no one else could." The signature was smudged, almost unreadable. But something about it, Some tiny stroke of a letter tugged at memories I'd buried long ago. Sometimes I think a family falls apart not in an explosion, but in a quiet crumbling, when everyone decides not to notice the cracks. I kept patching and mending, hoping love would hold us together. But some fractures go too deep, and as the distance between us grew, a question haunted me. If you give everything for your family, what's left when they decide they're better off without you? Betrayal in a family doesn't always come with shouting, slammed doors, or wild accusations. Sometimes it's as quiet as a pen gliding across a page, or as soft as a daughter's voice urging, "Just sign it, Mom. It's only for a little while." That was how it began for me. It was late March when I got sick. Just a nasty virus, I thought. Nothing a strong cup of tea and a few days' rest couldn't fix. But the exhaustion clung to me, heavier than before. Thomas visited often, bringing soup and bills, his eyes darting away from mine. Amanda stopped by with excuses, always checking her phone, always in a hurry. One evening, Richard and Vanessa arrived together. Vanessa carried a stack of papers and a folder she pressed into my hands. "These are just to make things easier while you recover," she said. Richard sat on the edge of my bed, his voice unusually gentle. "We want to make sure everything's in order, just in case." I was too tired to argue, too worn down to read the fine print. My son's voice was the last straw. "Please, Mom, for us." My signature was all it took. With a flick of the wrist, my name vanished from the deed to our home, from our joint accounts, from every place I thought I belonged. I didn't even know I was signing myself out of my own life. It happened so quietly that I didn't realize what I'd lost until I tried to pay a utility bill, and the account was locked. The first time I noticed the change, I was searching for my wedding ring in the jewelry box. Gone, replaced with an invoice for property management services. The next time I found my mother's recipe book boxed up in the basement, labeled donation. I asked Amanda about it, and she wouldn't meet my gaze. "Dad says we need to keep things organized," she mumbled, then left the room. Thomas avoided me altogether, spending more and more time at work, staying out late, returning home with a haunted look. Vanessa's presence filled every empty corner. She started rearranging the kitchen, moving my coffee mugs to new shelves, tossing old family photos into a storage bin marked miscellaneous. The final blow came when Richard announced he'd hired a senior care consultant to help me transition into a more manageable living arrangement. It wasn't my choice. It was an ultimatum dressed up as concern. Suddenly, my world shrank to one room at a small, impersonal facility. My belongings were reduced to 2 suitcases and a box of keepsakes. The house, my house, was now home to Richard, Vanessa, and whatever future they imagined together. But that wasn't all. I learned through a friend that the lawyer handling the property transfer was someone I once helped years ago. He'd come into the ER after a car accident, bleeding out, saved only by a transfusion from my rare RH blood. He'd sent me a card at the time, thanking me for giving him a second chance. Now it seemed he was giving my family a second chance, at my expense. Lying in that strange new bed, I replayed the last few months, searching for clues I'd missed. Had Thomas's desperate requests for help really been about me? Or was he trying to save himself from drowning in debt? Was Amanda's distance a symptom of loyalty to her father, or simply her own fear of confronting pain? Why had Vanessa, the outsider, suddenly become the center of my family's universe? I started to notice odd connections. Vanessa always seemed to know things about me she shouldn't. My favorite flower, my allergy to penicillin, the song my mother used to hum when she made tea. One night, I woke from a dream, convinced I'd seen that same silver locket Vanessa wore, years ago, in a photo of my missing sister. A crazy thought, I told myself. But the feeling of familiarity haunted me. The more I dug, the more uneasy I became. I asked the facility nurse if she remembered seeing anyone with a scar like Vanessa's, a thin, crescent-shaped line just below her wrist, identical to the one I'd gotten falling off my bike as a girl. "Funny," she replied. She said she got it falling as a child, too. At first, I clung to anger. Anger at my husband, my children, at Vanessa most of all. But as the days passed, grief began to soften my rage, shaping it into something else. I started to wonder, if my own children could be so easily turned against me, what part of this did I miss? Had my desire to give everything left nothing for myself? Had I loved them so much I'd made it too easy to let me go? With nothing left but time, I found myself staring at the cracks in the ceiling, feeling every inch of betrayal, but also feeling the old spark, the part of me that solved impossible problems for strangers, that brought healing out of chaos. Maybe, just maybe, there was still something left in me to fight for. I had lost my home, my place, and for a time, my hope, but I still had my name, my story, and the quiet secrets only a mother carries. And quietly, beneath the surface, a plan began to take shape, one that would test the very limits of forgiveness, legacy, and what it truly means to be a family. Days in the care facility passed with the slow ache of old wounds, but I was never one to surrender. Nurses assumed I was quiet because I was sad, but really, I was listening, picking up scraps of gossip, filing away details the same way I once catalogued medications and blood types for sick children. I began to stitch a private timeline, connecting dots my family didn't want me to see. The first clue came through a faded birthday card, left in the pocket of an old coat I hadn't worn in years. The card was signed, "With Love, V," dated years before Vanessa ever joined our lives. In the card's margin, a child's handwriting read, "Sisters forever, don't forget me." My heart twisted. The memory came back in pieces. A stormy night, a broken window. My little sister's voice promising we'd always find each other. I'd buried that hurt for decades. My unease grew as news from home trickled in through staff and friends. Amanda posted on social media about her new mom's cooking. Richard was photographed at a charity gala, Vanessa at his side. My absence was never mentioned. Thomas, meanwhile, called less and less, and when he did, his tone was tight. He sounded older, thinner, desperate. I sensed the pressure building in him. Once he slipped up and mentioned that, "The company's on the edge, Mom. Dad's hiding things." He didn't say more, but I heard the panic in his voice. Determined not to be erased, I reached out to Margaret, my oldest friend, and the only one who'd never turned away. She agreed to dig into Richard's business dealings and check public records for anything on Vanessa's past. What we found staggered me. 2 years ago, Richard had narrowly avoided a lawsuit after a shipment of defective medical equipment almost cost a hospital its license. Margaret also learned that Vanessa's adoption records were sealed, her birth certificate missing from county files. One afternoon, the facility's attorney visited with a stack of paperwork from the house. My personal effects, he called them. But among the usual clutter was a battered leather-bound notebook. It wasn't mine. Inside, I found notes in Vanessa's handwriting, each page a tangled record of payments, expenses, and appointments, and reminders to call Richard, sometimes signed with a little heart. The final page, dated a year before the betrayal, simply read, "Remember the scar." That night, lying awake, I recalled the moment I'd seen Vanessa's wrist. I saw myself as a girl, racing a little blonde child through the rain, both of us tumbling over the curb, both howling with laughter as our skins scraped the concrete. I still bore the same crescent scar. I couldn't shake the thought. Was it possible? Meanwhile, my own legal advocate found a lead. The lawyer who handled my property transfer had been under investigation for falsifying documents in another case. Yet he'd just paid off a massive debt, seemingly out of nowhere. It didn't add up, unless someone had paid him off. Vanessa, Richard, or Thomas out of desperation? I arranged for Margaret to visit with Amanda and collect more information. Amanda, sweet but anxious, confessed that she'd grown to rely on Vanessa. "She understands, Dad. She helps us all keep calm. But I miss you, Mom." Amanda's eyes watered as she handed over a bag of old jewelry. Inside was a broken chain, one half of a locket I had given my sister the night she disappeared. Pieces of the puzzle fell together. Richard was drowning in debt. Vanessa had secrets of her own. And Thomas, dear, desperate Thomas, had believed betraying me was the only way to save our family's future. But Vanessa, the outsider, now seemed not just a threat, but a thread from my own past, a ghost in my family's drama. As the truth loomed larger, I grew restless, refusing to let pain turn to bitterness. Instead, I wrote a letter to Thomas. "I know you're afraid. I know things are messy. But you are still my son, and there's nothing you can do that can make me stop loving you. Don't let this mistake be the end of our story." Then, almost as if fate wanted me to dig deeper, the facility nurse showed me a local newspaper. There in the corner was an article about the Angel of Blood, the story of a young nurse who'd saved a child's life with a rare Rh transfusion. The date and place matched Vanessa's childhood hospital before she was adopted. So many cracks, so many hidden truths. But for the first time in months, I felt something other than loss, a fierce surge of determination. I wasn't just a victim of betrayal. I was a mother, a sister, a survivor. This was my family's story, too, and I was done being written out of it. There were more secrets to unearth, more reckonings to come. And as I closed my eyes that night, I vowed. The next time I walked through my own front door, I'd do it with my head held high, and with every secret in the open, no matter how painful. Spring came, and with it a storm of subpoenas, legal filings, and sleepless nights. The world outside seemed to move on, but inside the quiet walls of the care facility, I found myself at the center of a different kind of battle. A battle for my story, my dignity, and for the truth I still believed could set my family free. With Margaret's relentless help, my case was finally brought to court. The first hearing was surreal. Richard and Vanessa sat at one table, composed but wary. Thomas lingered at their side, eyes dark, suit too big for his frame, while Amanda gripped her purse, hands shaking. My own lawyer, Mr. Bryant, arrived carrying not just evidence, but a memory. He was the man whose life I'd once saved with a rare RH transfusion. "You gave me a second chance," he said quietly, "and now it's my turn." The judge, stern but attentive, opened the proceedings with a pointed question. "Mrs. Carter, do you understand you signed over all property rights?" I nodded. "I understand what the paper says, Your Honor, but I also understand when something doesn't feel right." Mr. Bryant presented the evidence: the hasty transfer of the deed, the suspiciously timed bank withdrawals, and the lawyer who'd handled the paperwork, now under investigation for fraud. He read aloud a letter from my trust fund's bank, proving that the assets had never legally been transferred, since only I could unlock them. Richard's face tightened, his confidence faltering. Then Margaret produced the battered notebook, exposing a web of financial cover-ups: Richard's debts, Vanessa's payments, and, most damning, the payoff to the corrupt lawyer. Every page was another brick in the case for my quiet revenge, not with anger, but with facts and faith. Vanessa's composure cracked. "I was trying to protect us," she blurted out, her voice trembling. "Richard said the business would fail if I didn't help." Amanda burst into tears, overwhelmed. Thomas, who'd barely spoken, finally stood up. "It was my fault, Mom. Dad and Vanessa said you'd be okay. I thought we'd fix it before you even noticed." The room grew heavy with regret, but the judge pressed on. "Who benefited most from these actions?" Richard tried to shift the blame. "It was for the family. Helen always wanted control. I just needed a fresh start." But my lawyer was ready. "Mrs. Carter may have signed, but she was deceived. Her trust fund, her pension, and her inheritance remain in her name, and any attempt to seize them is fraud." A ripple of shock ran through the room. The judge ordered an audit and temporary freeze of all family assets. "Until we have clarity, no funds are to be moved, and no one is to change the locks or remove property from the home." It was a lifeline, a pause for justice. Outside the courthouse, I saw Thomas sitting alone on a bench, head in his hands. I sat beside him, our silence filled with years of unspoken words. Finally, he whispered, "I didn't know how to say no to them. I thought losing the house would break us, but losing you was worse." I put my hand over his. "We're not lost, Thomas. We're just cracked. Cracks let the light in, if you let them." Meanwhile, Margaret and Amanda went through old family boxes, finding yet another piece of the puzzle: a hospital ID bracelet, tiny and faded, with Vanessa's childhood name. The date matched the week my sister vanished. That night, I lay awake, heart pounding, knowing a deeper truth was trying to surface. Was Vanessa the lost sibling I'd mourned all these years, swept into our lives by fate's cruel hand? The scars, the necklace, the matching birthdays. It was almost too much to hope for, or to fear. Back in court, the tension simmered. Richard's lawyer tried to paint me as controlling, while Vanessa claimed she only wanted what was best for everyone. The judge was unconvinced. Intentions matter, but so do actions. I'll decide once the audit is complete and testimony is finished. As we filed out, Amanda squeezed my arm. I'm sorry, Mom. I wish I'd listened sooner. We all just wanted to feel safe. But I don't know who we are anymore. I looked at her, seeing both the little girl who clung to me in thunderstorms and the grown woman caught in a storm of her own. We're family, Amanda. Sometimes that means breaking, so we can put the pieces back stronger. Outside, the spring wind carried petals across the courthouse steps, a reminder that new things can bloom, even in the aftermath of betrayal. There was still more to uncover, more wounds to tend, and more reckonings to face, but for the first time, I didn't feel alone in my fight. I felt at last that I was fighting for something worth reclaiming. Not just my home, but my place in the story, and my hope that forgiveness could still take root in even the rockiest ground. The final weeks before judgment blurred into a fog of court dates, headlines, and difficult truths. Our family secrets were no longer private. Every detail spilled across the courtroom, the press, and the faces of strangers who watched with curiosity or pity. The audit was ruthless. Every dollar Richard had borrowed against the house, every payment to the fraudulent lawyer, every shipment of faulty medical equipment came to light. Margaret's testimony, calm and meticulous, exposed the cover-up. Falsified financials, bribes to regulatory inspectors, and the deliberate masking of dangerous inventory. It was no longer a family matter. It was a public reckoning. The judge's voice was grave. Mr. Carter, the evidence demonstrates not only fraud against your wife, but endangerment of patients and the public. As of this day, you are suspended from all executive roles. Your actions have been referred to the district attorney and state medical board for criminal review. Richard did not look at me. He stared at the table, his hands trembling as his world fell apart. Not in an instant, but crack by crack, truth by truth. Amanda wept openly. Thomas sat rigid, lips white. Vanessa, pale and shaking, clutched the hospital bracelet Margaret had uncovered. She whispered, almost too softly to hear, I never wanted this. I only wanted a family that couldn't be taken away. The judge continued. As for Mrs. Carter, the transfer of the house and financial assets was achieved through deception and under duress. All property is to be restored immediately. The court recognizes her service to the community and the sacrifices she has made for her family. As the gavel fell, I felt a deep shudder of relief and sorrow. Justice had been served, but the cost was more than money or a name on a deed. The truth had torn us open, but perhaps that was the only way healing could begin. After court, Thomas came to me in the hallway. I was so afraid to lose everything, Mom. I never thought I could lose myself in the process. I'm sorry. I don't know if you can forgive me. I hugged him tightly. We're all flawed, Thomas. But forgiveness isn't just for the innocent. It's for anyone brave enough to ask for it. That evening, Vanessa met me in a quiet corner of the courthouse, her eyes rimmed red, the bracelet in her hand. I saw the DNA results, Helen. I know now. I really am your sister. All these years I wondered why I felt out of place. Now I know. I wish I'd found you before I ruined so much." Tears spilled down my cheeks, but not from anger. "We can't undo the past, Vanessa, but we get to choose what happens next." As I walked out into the spring air, the weight of old wounds felt lighter. The reporters wanted a statement, but I had none to give. What mattered was the quiet reunion of those left standing, the chance to rebuild, not on secrets, but on truth. Richard's fate would be decided by a higher court now, his power gone, his reputation in tatters, his freedom uncertain. It was not revenge. It was simply the world correcting itself. Amanda and Thomas stood with me as we left the courthouse, their hands in mine, the beginnings of hope flickering between us. At home that night the house was silent. Margaret made tea, and Amanda unpacked boxes, each item placed carefully, no longer reminders of loss, but tokens of survival. Vanessa returned the locket, both halves now together. "Let's start over, Helen," she said. "Not as enemies, but as sisters." And so, with every scar exposed and every secret spoken, we faced the future. It would not be easy, and there would be more apologies than answers, more rebuilding than celebration. But we had earned our second chance, not by hiding what we'd done, but by facing it, side by side. Returning to the house felt like stepping into a memory you're not sure belongs to you anymore. The rooms were emptier, but the air was lighter, a strange mix of loss and possibility. This home had seen betrayal, secrets, and heartbreak, but now it stood on the edge of something new. Vanessa arrived first. She stood on the porch, clutching the bracelet and the locket, her eyes searching mine for permission, for forgiveness, for a sign that the story could change. For a long moment, I just looked at her, my sister, my betrayer, my only remaining link to a family I thought I'd lost forever. She broke the silence. "I want to make things right, Helen. I can't fix what I've done, but I can help rebuild what's left." I took the locket and snapped it together with my own. "We'll rebuild together. Family isn't just who shares your blood. It's who stands by you when everything else falls apart." Inside, Amanda and Thomas worked in the kitchen, unpacking dishes and photo albums, tentatively asking where I wanted things, afraid of overstepping. Their uncertainty hurt, but it was honest. Amanda brought me tea, hands trembling, and said softly, "I thought keeping quiet would protect us. I realize now, silence is its own kind of betrayal." I hugged her, feeling the weight of years between us melt, just a little. "Love isn't about never making mistakes, Amanda. It's about coming back and making things right." Thomas approached, eyes red but determined. "I've already started looking for a new job, Mom. I know I let fear guide me, but I want you to know I'm here for the hard stuff, not just the happy moments." Forgiveness wasn't instant. It was awkward, a dance of apologies and small attempts to show up differently. That night we ate dinner together in the half-unpacked dining room. For the first time in months, laughter returned. Not the easy laughter of innocence, but the tentative, hopeful laughter of people who know what's at stake. As we cleaned up, Vanessa brought out a shoebox. I found something. Inside were pieces of our childhood. An old birthday card with "Sisters Forever," scribbled in childish script. Faded photos of two little girls in matching dresses. and a hospital discharge slip from the week she disappeared. Amanda gasped. "You really are family," she whispered as the past connected to the present. Later, Richard called. His voice was small, almost unfamiliar. "They've taken my license, Helen. The business is finished. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know losing everything made me realize what matters. If you ever need help, or if the kids do, I'll try to be a better father than I was a husband." I listened, a strange peace settling over me. Justice isn't revenge, Richard. It's the world giving us a chance to become who we should have been all along. I hope you use yours well. Spring rain tapped on the windows. In the quiet, Vanessa and I planted flowers in the garden. For every secret uprooted, we pressed a new root into the soil, a living promise that what was broken could grow again. Amanda joined us, Thomas hauling bags of mulch. We worked mostly in silence, but it was the good kind, the kind that speaks of effort and hope, not shame. As dusk settled, I gathered them all on the porch. "This house is more than bricks and memories," I said. "It's a second chance for all of us. I want it to be a place where no one is forgotten, where mistakes are owned and forgiveness is possible." Vanessa squeezed my hand, tears shining. "Let's make it a place that welcomes lost sisters, lost children, anyone who needs to begin again." Amanda nodded. "And let's tell the truth, even when it hurts." Thomas smiled, a little stronger than before. "I'm ready to build something real." And I, after a lifetime of giving, realized this was my true legacy. Not the home itself, but the people within it, finally facing the past and daring to start again. In that moment, I knew the story wasn't just about what I'd lost. It was about everything we were finding, together. It's funny how scars fade, but never truly disappear. Ours, etched across wrists, hearts, and memory, became reminders of where we'd been, not warnings of what we'd lost. The house, once filled with shadows and silence, now hummed with possibility. Vanessa and I finished the garden together, planting new seeds beside the old, our laughter as bright as the spring sun. Amanda started organizing family dinners, inviting neighbors and friends who'd once drifted away. Thomas found steady work and a little of himself. Learning forgiveness was a skill, not a feeling. Even Richard, from a distance, sent a letter. "I hope one day you'll remember me for more than my mistakes." But the true legacy was this: House of Hope, a home we opened to others in need. Single mothers, lost siblings, those turned away by the world. They found comfort under our roof, proof that no one is beyond redemption. My story, once about quiet pain, became one of quiet power. We still had scars and always would, but we wore them openly now, a patchwork of second chances. Healing was never perfect, but it was real. If you've ever carried scars you thought would define you, what would it take to turn them into something beautiful? Would you risk forgiveness for a future worth rebuilding? Let your story grow. And if you're ready to begin again, you'll always have a place at our table.